Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Budget Magic. So, this week, we are heading to Modern to play Green Black Zombies. And it's kind of a funny story with this deck. When Eldritch Moon released, one of the things I told myself, and I think I actually said this to Richard too, is I want to make a deck around each of the tribes from Eldritch Moon. You got zombies, you got spirits, you got humans, you got werewolves. The thing I did not expect is that these decks would end up being better in Modern and Standard. So this is the second week in a row we're kind of exploring an Eldritch Moon tribe in Modern, and the deck is actually really sweet. There's some really good zombies in Modern. One other thing, this is the last Budget Magic before Kaladesh releases, so if you're waiting for some sweet new Standard decks, starting next week, we are going to have a string of Kaladesh Standard decks. A quick reminder before we break down the deck, if you enjoy Budget Magic and this Green Black Zombies deck, it would be amazing of you if you could take a quick second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. We're closing in on 50,000 subscribers. Be awesome if you could help us reach that goal. Anyway, let's talk Green Black Zombies. So this deck is essentially an aggressive beatdown zombie deck, except it also has a ton of Gravecrawler synergies. So Gravecrawler, a 2-powered 1-drop, which is what your aggro decks wants, and having a bunch of good 1-drops is one of the big reasons to play zombies in Modern. We actually have a total of 12 1-drops in the deck, which is where you want to be for an aggressive deck. Gravecrawler is just super powerful. It can't block, kind of a bummer, but it does have 2 power. The big deal is you can cast it from your graveyard as long as you control a zombie. So this means a few things. Most obviously, you can kind of attack with it if your opponent blocks and kills it. We get to get it back for just 1 mana. More importantly, we have some sweet synergies with it. So one thing we can do is play a Crypt Breaker on turn 1. On turn 2, discard our Gravecrawler, get a 2/2 zombie token from Crypt Breaker, and then we can always just cast the Gravecrawler from our graveyard, get it on the battlefield. Crypt Breaker is super strong. Crypt Breaker is one of the better zombies in Modern. I realized this over the course of our games. In a lot of matchups, it is a must-kill threat. It's a 1-drop that you just have to kill. In this deck, and I hate to make this comparison because I'm probably being a little hyperbolic, but it's kind of like Deathrite Shaman. It doesn't do the same things, but it does a whole bunch of things. And the ability to make tokens out of useless lands, the ability to discard Gravecrawler for value, and the ability to draw a bunch of cards for free and generate card advantage is just super good. Lotlith Troll is kind of our big beater in the 2-drop slot. Also, some sweet Gravecrawler synergy. So when you play Lotlith Troll on turn 2, it has trample, it regenerates, it's only a 2/1, but we can make it bigger by giving it a +1/+1 counter by discarding a creature. Well, we can discard the Gravecrawler, make our Lotlith Troll a 3/2, and then get the Gravecrawler back for free. So Lotlith Troll just grows really big, it can block anything because of regeneration, and it can turn into a really big threat over the course of time. So this is one of our big synergy packages. Also, speaking of synergies, Diagraph Colossus and Gravecrawler, another combo in our deck. Diagraph Colossus is a lot better than I imagined. There are a lot of games where we play Diagraph Colossus and it just completely takes over the game. Of course, Gravecrawler is a sweet synergy because once we discard it to, say, our Crypt Breaker, we can cast our Diagraph Colossus. It gets a +1/+1 counter from the Gravecrawler being in the graveyard, so it comes in as at least a 3/3, which is nice. 4/4 is even better, getting out of bolt range, but 3/3, nice bonus. And then we can cast the Gravecrawler from the graveyard. We get our Gravecrawler plus another 2/2 zombie token from Diagraph Colossus. So we have the ability to go really wide thanks to not only Crypt Breaker, but also Diagraph Colossus. So we can just go really wide with 2/2 zombie tokens, kind of flood the board, and win the game that way. We also have some big beaters. Diagraph Ghoul and Putrid Leech. Yes, they trigger our Diagraph Colossus. Yes, they're zombies we can tap with Crypt Breaker. All that stuff, but really, they're just powerful for their mana cost. Diagraph Ghoul gives us another 1-drop that has 2 power. It enters the battlefield tapped, so it's not always the best chump blocker, but it starts attacking for 2 damage on turn 2, which is very nice for a 1-drop. Putrid Leech is a 2-drop that can readily attack for 4. We pay 2 life, it becomes becomes a 4/4. Actually makes it good on both offense and defense. Picture Grim Flair almost. It kind of is a similar budget version. It doesn't let us scry, but it's a 2-mana 2/2 that can become a 4/4. And since we're the aggressive deck that's looking to kill our opponent, paying 2 life usually isn't the end of the world if it means getting in 2 extra damage. And then we have our finishers. Our 3-drops kind of close out the game. Cemetery Reaper, the only lord in our deck. We're not overloaded on lords. The problem with zombie lords is they're all at 3+ mana, and we just can't play that many 3-drops. So Cemetery Reaper pumps up all our zombies, also gives us the ability to make even more 2/2 zombies by exiling cards from the graveyard. And we can do this from any graveyard, so it's some incidental hate against reanimation, against Kitchen Finks coming back into play, against Dredge. It's slow, so it's not just game over against those decks, but sometimes exiling a Kitchen Finks right when it's about to persist back onto the battlefield is a pretty big deal. And Geralt's Messenger gives us some reach, 3/2 for 3 black mana, enters the battlefield tapped, but it makes our opponent lose 2 life when it enters the battlefield. And then it has Undying, so once it dies, it comes back in as a 4/3 with that +1/+1 counter. Very good for a 3-drop, and drains our opponent for another 2. So altogether, it can deal 4 damage to our opponent and be a reasonable on-curve threat. So Geralt's Messenger is another one of the best zombies in Modern, and that's another one of the reasons why we can't just play a ton of 3-drop lords and we only have the 3 Cemetery Reapers. As far as the rest of the deck, pretty straightforward. We have some removal in Doomblades and Dismembers, get our opponent's blockers out of the way so we can keep beating down with our zombies. Also disrupts whatever creature-based combos might be happening across the board. As far as the mana base, a bunch of green-black duels. Hissing Quagmire gives us some additional reach in the late game as a creature land, helps when we flood out or when our board gets wrathed. Llanowar Waste, Temple of Malady, a single Evolving Wilds, a bunch of basic lands, and a main deck Bajuka Bog to fight against Snapcaster decks, to fight against Dredge and other graveyard decks. As far as the sideboard, we kind of break cards down based by what they fight against. So Duress, we bring them in against control decks. We also bring them in against combo decks. So this is the card that gets the Supreme Verdict or the Anger of the Gods out of our opponent's hand. Also the card that can slow down Ad Nauseam combo, slow down Scape Shift, things like that by a turn or 2 to give us enough time to win with our zombies. Disfigure and Brindlebore come in against aggro decks. Disfigure kills the Goblin Guide, other early game creatures. Brindlebore is sort of a really bad Kitchen Finks. It's a 3-drop that can gain us 4 life. It doesn't do all the good blocking and persisting that Kitchen Finks does, but it's way cheaper, so that's our budget substitute. We have some Graveyard Hate and Tormod's Crypt and Withered Wretch, which is a really sweet card. 1 mana can remove a card from a graveyard. So it's a 2-drop zombie, a 2/2, so it's on curve, and we can use this to just almost like Scavenging Ooze. It doesn't grow like Scavenging Ooze or gain us life, but it works the same way. We can just pick off whatever card our opponent's going to flashback with Snapcaster, get rid of the prize amalgams our opponent's trying to trigger with Dredge. Really good Graveyard Hate, and picks up from all our zombie synergies, tapping it to our Crypt Breaker, triggering Colossus, all that stuff. Natural State, Seal of Primordium, and Creeping Corrosion help against Affinity. They also help against Ensnaring Bridge, things like that. And then we have 2 Lifebane zombies, which don't really come in a specific matchup, but they can come in to exile things like Tarmogoyf. They're decent in a weird range of matchups. If we're worried about Thragtusk and Tarmogoyfs or Thrun the Last Troll, it's very good. And that is our green-black zombie deck for Modern, and I have to say this deck is pretty sweet. It is better than I thought it would be as I was building it. It's not the fastest deck in Modern. We can't compete with Wild Nikado Goblin Guide, Wild Nikado, Atarka's Command, attack you for 1,000,000. We're not that level of aggro, but we are fast enough to get in and kill our opponent underneath things like Supreme Verdict a lot of the time. So we can still punish opponents for having clunky draws, keeping one-landers, things like that. The good news is we're kind of more resilient than a lot of faster aggro decks. Crypt Breaker gives us the ability to draw a ton of cards, which is something that's missing from a lot of other aggro creature decks. And our Diref Colossus just lets us go super wide, and Gravecrawler is a recurring threat, so we have ways to get back into the game after Wrath, to fight through removal, that Goblin Guide and Wild Nacatl based decks might be lacking. So that's kind of where this deck fits. It's not as fast as the fastest creature based aggro decks, but it's much more resilient. So if you're looking for a way to take advantage of zombies in Modern, this might be the deck for you. Anyway, that's been our deck tech for Green Black Zombies. I hope you enjoy the gameplay videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you soon.